Imagine that one sentence in court could turn a whole case upside down. That was the thought that seemed to hang over the room, even though no one said it out loud. Morning in the municipal courtroom dragged in like a gray coat. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above the rows of worn wooden benches. People shifted, coughed, checked their phones. The air smelled of old paper, floor cleaner, and the sweet wax the custodian had rubbed into the pews so many times that the grain shone like satin. An officer at the side table flipped through folders with a dry, rhythmic snap. Another leaned on the wall, arms folded, watching the door. A woman in a navy blazer whispered to her husband about a parking ticket. A young man in a work shirt studied a pink citation as if he could erase the fine by staring hard enough. The murmur in the room was low and practical: babysitters, work shifts, how long this would take. Then he walked in. The door creaked, a thin strip of colder air sliding in with him. 22, maybe, in a cheap button-down that didn't quite fit across the shoulders, dark jeans, sneakers too clean for a mechanic but too scuffed for a salesman. Devon. He hesitated for half a second on the threshold, as if he'd misread the address, then pushed himself forward. A crooked grin appeared on his face, late and forced, like a light bulb flickering to life after a power surge. His fingers kept fussing with the folded summons, refolding the same edge until it curled. He nodded to someone who hadn't actually looked at him, pretending it was a greeting. Case number 1173, Devon Carter, the clerk called. He stepped up to the podium, cleared his throat, and glanced at the nameplate in front of the bench, Judge Francis J. Caprio. The old wood of the bench, the seal on the wall, the flag at one side, all of it suddenly seemed much taller than it had from the back of the room. "Good morning," Judge Caprio said, voice calm, worn smooth by years of repetition. Devon's smile tightened. He leaned slightly toward the microphone, then away again, as if unsure whether to trust it. His tongue touched his upper lip, his eyes darted to the officer holding his file, then back to the judge. "Your Honor, my car," he paused, a short, nervous laugh catching in his chest. "Well, it wanted to turn." The words hung there like someone had opened a window in January. A woman in the second row let out a muffled chuckle. Someone behind her sighed, the kind of sound that says, "Here we go." A man with a traffic ticket in his hand stopped fanning himself and stared. Caprio's right eyebrow rose, just a fraction. His hands, resting on the bench, didn't move. The lines around his eyes deepened, not with annoyance, but with something more careful, the way a doctor studies an X-ray. "Your car wanted to turn," he repeated, not quite a question, not quite disbelief. Devon shrugged with one shoulder, as if telling a story at a diner, not in front of a court seal. "Yes, sir. I mean, Your Honor." The sign said no left turn, but, he flicked his fingers in the air, mimicking a wheel. It kinda went anyway. Behind him, a whisper rippled through the benches. "Is he serious? Must think this is a comedy show." The officer at the table opened a folder, slid out a sheet, and looked up over the rim of his glasses. No smile there. "Mr. Carter," Judge Caprio said gently, "the report states this is your third violation in 1 week." Devon's grin froze. For a heartbeat it stayed on his face, too wide, too smooth, like a mask someone forgot to remove. Only his eyes betrayed him, the pupils tightening, the lids blinking a little too fast. His fingers, still on the summons, pressed hard enough to leave a crease across his thumbnail. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Yeah, I've had a rough week, Your Honor." "Apparently," Caprio replied. His tone stayed even, but he leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on the bench now, like a man moving closer to hear a confession. There was no scolding in his eyes, only a patient curiosity that made excuses sound smaller. "So," the judge said, "help me understand this. First you say the car turned on its own." Devon's shoulders bobbed in another half-shrug. "It did feel like that, sir. In a no-turn zone. For the third time." Caprio's fingers tapped once on the edge of the file, then stilled. "Do you see why people might have questions about that explanation? Someone in the back snorted, then coughed to cover it. The chuckles that followed were softer now, less mocking, more uncertain. The room wasn't sure whether to laugh at the story or lean in closer to hear the rest. Devon swallowed. The muscles in his jaw clenched, then relaxed. His eyes flicked toward the rows of strangers behind him, searching for a friendly face and finding only watchers. When he turned back to the bench, the smile had almost vanished, leaving a young man who looked suddenly much younger. "I know how it sounds," he murmured. "But it's not just that." The judge's gaze stayed steady, the way a lamp stays steady through a storm outside the window. For a moment, the hum of the lights, the shuffling of papers, the rustle of jackets all seemed to fade. Caprio folded his hands together. "All right, Mr. Carter," he said quietly. "If it's not just that, then what is it? Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel." Caprio didn't respond right away. He rested back, weighing the young man at the podium. "Before we argue about that turn," he said, "tell me about yourself, Mr. Carter. Who are you?" Devon tried a grin. "Just a driver, sir. I live in my car more than at home." The joke died in the air. "Not much to tell." "Tell it anyway," the judge replied. "Family. Work. Start there." Devon looked down at the ticket, thumb rubbing the edge. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its swagger. "My dad had a shop," he said. "Carter's Auto. Little brick place off Elm. Mom ran the desk, fought with the parts guys, made coffee so strong it could clean engines." A quick, real smile appeared. "I grew up under lifts. I knew the sound of an impact wrench better than cartoons. Dad would tap the toolbox, I'd hand him whatever he asked for. I thought that was what all kids did." Several people in the gallery had turned toward him now. "Is the shop still open?" Caprio asked. The smile vanished. "No, Your Honor." Devon's jaw tightened. Dad cleared a used sedan for a customer. Looked okay for what the man could pay. But something inside was bad. Rust, a crack, who knows? He missed it. A few weeks later the steering failed. The guy hit a pole. He took a breath. No one died. But there were lawyers. Insurance. They said Dad was at fault. It took the shop, the savings, everything. Mom started working nights. Dad stopped talking about cars and started talking about bills. Devon lifted his head. He wasn't lazy. He was worn down. One mistake, and it was like he never fixed a thing in his life. Caprio's gaze shifted, not softer, but more intent, as if another file had just opened in his mind. "What about you?" he asked. "What did you do?" "I went to work," Devon said. "Signed on with a delivery company. Groceries, packages. They pay by the drop, but if you're late, they fine you. Every minute is a number on a screen. You fall behind, you bleed money." His fingers tightened on the podium. "So we drive fast. Everybody does. And the car you're in now? Bought it off a driveway ad. Old Toyota." He gave a short, humorless breath. "Seller called it a starter car. I had enough cash to agree." He hesitated. "It pulls when I turn. The wheel has play. Dash lights blink when I corner hard. But I don't tell my boss. If they think your car's junk, they think you are. The good routes go to the guys with clean vans." The smirks in the room had faded. "So when you said the car wanted to turn," Caprio remarked, "you weren't entirely joking." Devon met his eyes without a smile. "No, sir. The car fights me. The clock does, too. I just didn't want to stand here and say I'm one bad month from the same hole my dad fell into." The judge exhaled slowly. Around them, the room felt smaller, the petty complaints on the docket shrunk beside the picture now hanging in the air, a failed shop, a family on edge, and a young driver trying not to follow them down. Caprio tapped a fingertip against the file, not impatiently, but the way a man tests the strength of a bridge before stepping onto it. "Mr. Carter," he said, "walk me through what happened that day." Plainly. Devon lifted his shoulders, then let them fall. "Your Honor, I told you, something in the steering, caught. Or slipped. I don't know." "That's 3 different explanations you've given me," Caprio replied gently. "A car that acts on its own. A failing power assist. A locked wheel. Unless you're driving something possessed, those can't all be true." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the benches, lighter now, not aimed at him, but at the absurdity of the situation. Devon didn't join in. A faint color crept up his neck, and he swallowed as if tasting every bad choice he'd made on the way to this moment. "I wasn't trying to lie," he said. "I just didn't want to sound stupid." "That's rarely your biggest danger in this room," Caprio said, leaning forward a fraction. "Hiding something tends to do more harm than saying it wrong." Before Devon could answer, a voice came from the back, "He's not making it up." Heads turned. A man in a faded delivery uniform, blue shirt, company logo barely visible from wash and wear, stepped into the aisle. He held his cap in both hands, twisting the brim. "Sir," Caprio said, "state your name." "Ethan Morales." I'm Devon's neighbor." He cleared his throat. "And coworker." A few eyebrows lifted. So he wasn't just a friendly neighbor dropping by. He was someone who drove the same frantic routes, answered to the same dispatch messages, raced the same ticking clock. "You understand you're speaking in a courtroom," Caprio reminded him. "Yes, Your Honor. I wouldn't be here otherwise." Ethan approached with careful steps, as if the floor itself might object. He kept glancing at Devon, who looked as startled as anyone else, but also oddly relieved, like a man who thought he was falling alone and suddenly felt another hand grab his sleeve. "What do you know about his car?" the judge asked. Ethan bit his lip, thinking. "It acts up. I've seen it. Sometimes when he pulls out of our lot, the whole dash flickers. Headlights blink like they're winking at you. And when he turns, you can hear the steering groan. Not normal groan, sick groan." A few people shifted, reconsidering the young man at the podium. "Is that all?" Caprio asked. "No, sir." Ethan took a breath. "Sometimes the wheel tugs. I rode with him once when my van was in the shop. We were just going around a corner, and the wheel jerked like it wanted to finish the turn on its own." That earned a quiet murmur of surprise. Not laughter this time, curiosity, and something like concern. "Mr. Morales," the judge said, "I see your uniform. You work for the same delivery service?" "Yes, sir." "How often do your drivers get speeding or traffic violations?" Ethan's face shifted, pride replaced by discomfort. He stared down at the cap twisting in his hands. The room went still, sensing the turn, the way an audience goes silent when an orchestra lowers its instruments. "Often," he admitted. "More than anyone wants to say out loud." "Why?" Caprio asked, though the answer was already half-formed between them. "Because if you're late, they hit your pay. If you miss 2 windows in a row, they pull your route. People try to make up time. Some cut corners. Some run yellows. Some," he hesitated. "Some take turns they shouldn't." A long pause settled over the room, not heavy, but clarifying. Like dust caught in a shaft of sunlight, finally visible. Devon didn't move. His eyes lowered, not in shame, but something more complicated, gratitude mixed with the dread of being understood too well. "So you came here," Caprio said, "to defend your coworker?" "No, Your Honor." Ethan shook his head. "I came because he looked like he was about to bury himself with bad explanations. And he's not a bad guy. He's just stuck in a bad system." He glanced at Devon. "We all are." For the first time since stepping into the courtroom, Devon didn't try to hide behind a grin. His eyes met Ethan's with a rawness that made the moment feel almost too private for a public room. Caprio sat back slightly, folding his hands. Something had shifted, the case had widened. What began as a simple traffic violation now drew lines to a life unraveling under pressure, to a company pushing its workers to the edge, to a young man afraid to admit he was driving a car held together by hope and habit. A woman in the back row whispered, barely audible, "This isn't just about a turn." No one contradicted her. The judge let the silence breathe before he spoke again. Not dramatically, simply giving the truth room to stand upright. "Mr. Carter," he said finally, "it seems your car isn't the only thing pulling you off course." Devon looked up. There was no mask left. No swagger. Just a young man bracing himself for the part of the conversation he could no longer dodge. Caprio motioned to the clerk. "Let's see the footage." The lights dimmed slightly as the monitor flicked on. A still frame appeared, an intersection, early morning haze, the faint glint of dew on the asphalt. "Play it." The video rolled. Devon's Toyota entered the screen from the right lane, steady for a moment, then, without warning, veered sharply left. Not a wide drift, a sudden dart, the kind you make when instinct overrides thought. Several people in the gallery gasped. Someone muttered, "That's not a casual turn." Caprio's eyes narrowed. He leaned in, elbows on the bench. "Freeze it," he instructed. On the paused frame, just behind Devon's car, sat another vehicle, a matching courier sedan, its nose tucked dangerously close to his bumper. Too close. Much too fast. The judge's lips tightened. "That car behind you," he said. "Who is that?" Devon's breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. His posture stiffened, shoulders rising toward his ears. "That's one of ours," he said quietly. "One of yours?" Caprio asked. "And traveling at that speed?" A murmur rustled across the benches, like wind running fingers through leaves. "Mr. Carter," the judge continued, voice now lower, steadier, "cars don't leap sideways for no reason. What were you reacting to?" Devon wet his lips. Silence stretched, long enough for the tension to settle into every seat. "Your Honor," he paused, swallowed, tried again. "He was signaling me. From behind. Not politely, laying on the horn. I thought he wanted to blow past me." "And why," Caprio asked, "would he need to pass you that desperately?" Devon exhaled as though releasing a secret he never intended to speak aloud. "At work, routes aren't equal. They track how fast we finish. Whoever's higher on the board gets more shifts. If you fall behind, they cut your hours." The room sharpened with attention. Several older spectators exchanged knowing glances, a quiet recognition of a modern pressure they'd seen chew through younger generations. "So," Caprio said, "drivers compete with each other?" "Yes, sir. It's like a race you don't sign up for. If someone's moving faster, you get out of the way, or you're the one who gets written up." Before Caprio could respond, a uniformed traffic inspector in the front row raised a hand. "Your Honor, permission to address the court." "Go ahead," Caprio said. The inspector stood. "I stopped that second driver. The one behind Mr. Carter." His tone carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many close calls. "He blew through a red light at the next intersection. Nearly clipped a minivan." Devon shut his eyes for a beat. "I ran his plates," the inspector continued. "Young man, exhausted. He said he was chasing his rate, whatever that means. He kept apologizing, said he couldn't afford to fall lower on some company chart." A low, unsettled rumble moved through the room. This wasn't a single driver making careless choices. This was a chain reaction built into the job itself. Caprio's gaze drifted from the inspector to the video still frozen on the monitor, Devon's car jerking left, another barreling behind, the entire moment tight as a sprung trap. "What I'm seeing," the judge said slowly, "is not a reckless turn." Devon looked up, hope flickering and quickly suppressed. It looks, Caprio continued, like someone trying very hard not to be rear-ended. And not to lose my job, Devon added in a voice barely above a whisper. The judge didn't chastise him. He didn't dismiss it. He simply let the silence settle, the kind that announces a case has crossed a threshold. There would be no returning to the tidy box of routine violation. The truth was out, and the truth was larger. Caprio slid the monitor aside and folded his hands. We're not done, he said. If this company's practices are influencing what's happening on the road, I need documentation. All of it. A courier supervisor seated near the back, a man who had come only to observe, shifted uncomfortably as a folder was passed forward. Inside, schedules, route sheets, internal memos. Caprio skimmed the first page. His eyebrows lifted. 40 deliveries per hour, he read aloud, with automatic deductions for delays. A collective intake of breath swept through the gallery. He lifted another sheet. And repeated lateness results in immediate termination. Devon stared fixedly at the podium, jaw rigid. You received 2 warnings this week, Caprio observed, tapping the dates with his finger. The same 2 days these violations occurred. Devon managed a small nod. Yes, sir. So when that car closed in behind you, the judge said, you weren't only afraid of an accident. You were afraid of losing your livelihood. Devon didn't answer. He didn't need to. Caprio closed the folder and returned it with a quiet finality. This is pressure, he said. This is not safe practice. The courtroom settled into a heavy quiet, not shock, but recognition. Then he turned back to Devon. One more question. Does your vehicle have mechanical issues? Devon hesitated. A beat. Another. Yes, he said finally. The steering pulls left. Gets worse when I turn fast. I couldn't afford the full repair. Gasps, soft but sincere, drifted from the benches. And yet, Caprio said, the protocol notes state your car was purchased from a dealer recently investigated for selling rebuilt wrecks. Devon blinked hard. I didn't know that. You wouldn't, Caprio replied. Most consumers don't. But it explains quite a lot. The puzzle pieces were aligning, a failing steering rack, a predatory dealership, a punishing work system. The turn was beginning to look less like disobedience and more like a survival reflex caught on camera. Just as Caprio prepared to continue, a faint movement at the far end of the room caught his eye. A woman rose, slowly, as if unsure whether she had the right to stand. Her coat sleeves were pulled tight, her purse clutched to her chest. No makeup, hair pinned back simply. She looked like someone who had avoided attention all her life. I'm his mother, she said softly. Devon's head jerked in her direction, surprise widening his eyes. She stepped forward only 1 pace, enough for her voice to carry. He bought that car on my credit. Not his. Her gaze fell briefly to her son, filled with worry and apology woven together. He told me it was safe. He told me he got a good deal. He didn't want me to lose sleep. The room reacted in a low wave, some sighs, some murmured sympathy, a few hands covering mouths. The human cost of the situation was suddenly personal, not hypothetical. Devon's face flushed with a painful mix of shame and protectiveness. Ma, he whispered, you didn't have to. Yes, she interrupted gently. I did. Caprio watched them both for a long moment, the son who tried to carry everything alone, and the mother who finally refused to let him. This changes the picture, the judge said quietly. But it wasn't pity in his tone, it was understanding of the full weight pressing on the young man. A defective, possibly salvaged vehicle. A company pushing its drivers like racehorses. A family scraping through the aftermath of an old bankruptcy. A young worker balancing 3 kinds of fear, disappointing his mother, losing his job, and crashing on the road. Caprio's voice remained calm, but the shift was unmistakable. What I see here, he said, addressing the room as much as the defendant, is not irresponsibility. It is a man caught between poverty, workplace pressure, and a failing machine. A hush spread across the benches, not dramatic, not staged, but sincere. The kind of stillness that comes when everything finally fits. Caprio let the papers rest on the bench. For a moment, he simply breathed, a slow, collected inhale that steadied the room with him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a gravity that drew every ear forward. This, he said, is not a case about a turn. Silence settled, deep and unbroken. This is a case about a worker forced to choose between safety and employment. And no young man should have to gamble his life, or anyone else's, to keep his hours on a schedule. Devon's eyes lifted. He looked almost afraid to hope. Caprio continued, given the evidence, the pressure from your employer, the defective vehicle, and the footage showing a second driver approaching at an unsafe speed, the citation is dismissed. A soft gasp rippled through the gallery. One older man whispered, "About time someone said it." Devon blinked hard, unable to disguise the sting of sudden relief. His shoulders sagged as though someone had cut loose a weight he'd carried too long. But, Caprio added, raising a hand before gratitude could spill too quickly, this is not a free pass. Devon straightened again. I am dismissing the fine because the circumstances justify your reaction. Not because you're a good kid. Not because I feel sorry for you. I'm dismissing it because a system pushed you into a dangerous corner. He leaned forward slightly, tone firm. However, if you expect anyone to trust you behind that wheel, you must repair your car. Immediately. Devon nodded quickly. Yes, Your Honor. I will. No, Caprio said. You won't just promise me. He reached for the phone beside his bench, an old office handset with a coiled cord, the kind seldom touched during hearings. He dialed a number from memory. A few rings. A click. This is Judge Caprio, he said. I'm referring a young driver to your automotive assistance program. He needs steering work and cannot afford full labor costs. Yes, today if possible. Thank you. He hung up. Devon stared at him, stunned. You, set that up for me? I put you in contact with the people who can help, Caprio corrected. Whether you follow through, that's on you. From the back of the room came something unexpected, applause. Not loud or theatrical, just warm, almost grateful. A few people wiped at their eyes discreetly. Caprio waited for the noise to fade before he delivered the final point, the one he intended to stay with the young man long after the courtroom emptied. Mr. Carter, he said, the turn you made that morning was dangerous. It could have ended poorly for you or someone else. He paused. But today, you made another turn, one toward honesty and responsibility. Devon stood motionless, absorbing each word with a seriousness that hadn't been there at the start of the hearing. The law, Caprio continued, does not exist to frighten people. It exists to guide us, to keep us from harming ourselves and to remind us that we share these roads, and this world, with one another. The room held its breath. Then, from the last row, a small voice spoke. Thank you. Your Honor. Devon's mother stepped forward just enough to be seen. Her hands trembled slightly, but her chin was lifted with a kind of quiet dignity that needed no exaggeration. Caprio inclined his head. I'll accept your thanks, he said, when he finishes that repair. The room erupted in gentle laughter, the first true release of the entire proceeding. Even Devon managed a shy, weary smile. He whispered, I will, sir. I promise. Good, Caprio said, reaching for the next file. Then this hearing is concluded. But as Devon stepped back from the podium, something lingered in the air, not just relief, but transformation. A sense that a young driver had been given more than a dismissal, he'd been handed a new direction, a foothold away from fear and toward a future where he didn't have to outrun catastrophe just to make rent. In the hush that followed, as the next case number was called, the courtroom felt different, a little warmer, a little wiser, shaped for a moment by a judge who understood that justice isn't only a rulebook. Sometimes, it's a turning point.